People like you don't save lives, you follow orders. The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and final, in the sterile chill of the ICU, where fluorescent lights hummed softly above polished floors and the steady rhythm of a heart monitor traced green lines across a screen that no one seemed to truly watch except her. Naomi Carter stood still for half a second, her badge catching the light as she tightened her grip on the clipboard. Her eyes not on the man in the tailored suit, but on the numbers flickering beside his son's name, subtle, almost invisible shifts that most would miss, but she didn't. She couldn't. Not after the night that still lived under her skin like a quiet storm. The room itself seemed to hold its breath as Richard Halston adjusted his cufflinks with casual precision. The faint scent of expensive cologne cutting through antiseptic air, his presence commanding without effort, a man used to controlling outcomes, bending rooms, bending people. His voice calm, but edged with something colder than indifference. Stick to your job, nurse, he added, not even looking at her now, as if dismissing her required no more energy than brushing dust from his sleeve. Across the room a doctor murmured something polite, something agreeable, and the staff shifted just enough to signal alignment. Hierarchy settling into place like it always did, but Naomi didn't move, because the monitor didn't lie. The rhythm was wrong. Too clean in the wrong places. Too quiet between peaks. A silence inside the noise. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the bed rail as the boy, Ethan, lay still, smaller than he should look in a bed this size. His breathing shallow but steady for now. The kind of steady that made people comfortable. The kind that made them stop looking deeper. Sir, she said again. Softer this time but firmer. The word carrying more weight than volume. And for the first time Richard's gaze flicked toward her, not fully, just enough to acknowledge that she had spoken again, his brow tightening a fraction, not in concern but in annoyance. The air shifted, a pause stretching just long enough to feel deliberate. And then he smiled, not warmly, not kindly, just enough to make it clear he was used to being right. You're not paid to think, he said, almost gently, as if explaining something obvious to a child. And a few feet away someone exhaled, tension disguised as routine, but Naomi's eyes dropped back to the monitor. The line flickered again, a tiny stutter, a whisper of something about to break. And in that moment the past pressed forward, uninvited, a hospital room years ago, a different bed, a different set of eyes closing too soon while someone in authority said everything was fine, and the sound of that same kind of machine humming like it knew something no one else wanted to admit. Naomi blinked once, grounding herself, the present snapping back into focus, her pulse steady even if the room wasn't, and just beyond the glass, the city lights stretched for miles, silent witnesses to a moment no one yet understood was already changing everything. Naomi did not step back even as the weight of the room pressed against her shoulders, because she had learned a long time ago that hesitation was how small warnings became irreversible outcomes. And the monitor did not care about titles or money or authority. It only told the truth in quiet signals that most people ignored until it was too late. She shifted slightly closer to the bed, careful, controlled, her movements deliberate, so they would not be mistaken for panic, her eyes scanning the waveform again, measuring distance between peaks, counting seconds in her head the way she had trained herself to do during long overnight shifts when the hospital felt more like a living organism than a building, breathing slowly, reacting only when necessary. His rhythm is irregular, she said, not louder but clearer, each word placed with intention, and this time a young resident glanced up from the chart, uncertainty flickering across his face before he quickly masked it, because the room had already decided who was allowed to be right. Richard Halston let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but carried no humor, just impatience. He turned fully now, his presence filling the space, as if proximity alone should resolve the situation. You are reading too much into numbers, he said, his tone smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that closed deals and ended conversations. The best cardiology team in the state reviewed his case this morning. His hand rested lightly on the edge of the bed, not touching his son, not quite, as if closeness had to be controlled too. Naomi noticed that, the distance, the way his fingers hovered rather than settled, and something about it tightened in her chest. Not judgment, just recognition, a man who believed control was protection, Even here, even now, the machine gave another soft alert, not loud enough to alarm anyone else, just a subtle shift in tone, like a breath catching halfway. Naomi's gaze sharpened, her mind mapping patterns, remembering, adjusting. She had seen this progression before, not identical, but close enough to matter, the kind of change that unfolded in minutes, not hours. We should run another check, she said, steady, grounded, offering action instead of argument. But the attending physician shook his head almost immediately, a small motion that carried the weight of hierarchy more than analysis. Vitals are within acceptable range, he replied, already looking back down, already moving on. And that was the moment Naomi felt it. Not fear, not exactly, but the quiet realization that she was standing at the edge of a decision no one else was willing to acknowledge. The air felt colder somehow. Or maybe it was just the way silence settled when truth had no place to land. Richard adjusted his jacket again, a habitual gesture, precise and controlled, and stepped back half an inch as if the conversation itself had already concluded. Focus on your responsibilities, he said. Final now, not unkind but absolute. And Naomi nodded once, because outwardly that was what was expected, compliance, alignment, order, but her eyes did not leave Ethan. The boy's chest rising and falling in a rhythm that looked calm from a distance, but carried a tension underneath it, a slight delay, a hesitation between breaths that did not belong. Naomi shifted her weight, 1 foot forward, grounding herself, feeling the polished floor beneath her shoes, the hum of electricity in the walls, the quiet chorus of machines, all speaking at once if you knew how to listen. And she did. She always had. Because no one had listened when it mattered most before. Her fingers brushed the edge of the monitor panel, not activating anything, just close enough to feel present, ready, aware, and somewhere deep inside, beneath training and protocol and years of being told to stay within lines drawn by others. A single thought settled with clarity that did not need permission. If the room would not act, she would watch, and if watching was not enough, she would decide when to move, even if it meant stepping beyond the place they had assigned her. Time did not speed up, it narrowed, collapsing into the thin space between one heartbeat and the next as Naomi stood anchored beside the bed, her focus tightening until the rest of the room blurred into background noise. Voices softened, footsteps dulled. Even the city lights beyond the glass seemed distant and irrelevant, because everything that mattered was happening inside that small rise and fall of Ethan's chest. And the fragile rhythm traced across the monitor. She counted again, steady, precise, each interval mapping itself against memory. Not panic, never panic, just calculation layered over instinct, the kind built from long nights and quiet losses that no one documented. A faint change slipped through the waveform, subtle enough to be dismissed by anyone not looking for it. But Naomi saw it immediately, a hesitation where there should have been continuity. A gap that stretched just a fraction too long. Her fingers curled slightly at her side, grounding herself in the present moment. There is a delay in his conduction, she said, more firmly now, not asking, not suggesting, stating, and this time the attending physician paused, only for a second, but enough to acknowledge that something had been said, though not enough to truly consider it. He glanced at the screen, then back to his notes. The decision already made before the observation could fully exist. We will monitor, he replied. Neutral, controlled, the kind of answer that sounded responsible. Without changing anything, Richard shifted his stance again, impatience surfacing more clearly now, his control intact but thinner, like glass under pressure. You are creating unnecessary concern, he said, his voice quieter than before but sharper, directed now. Personal. And Naomi met his gaze for the first time, not challenging, not defiant, just steady, because this was not about him. Not really. It never was. Her attention returned immediately to Ethan, the boy's face calm, almost peaceful, the kind of stillness that fooled people into thinking everything was fine. But Naomi had learned that stillness could be the most dangerous sign of all. The machine gave another soft alert, slightly different this time, the pitch just a fraction higher. A detail that would disappear into the background for most, but stood out to her like a shift in gravity. Her mind moved quickly, tracing possibilities, narrowing outcomes. She stepped half an inch closer, subtle enough not to draw attention. intentional enough to reduce the distance if she needed to act. The air felt heavier now, not because anything visible had changed, but because something unseen had already begun, the kind of moment that did not announce itself until it was fully present. And then it was too late to prepare. Naomi exhaled slowly, keeping her breathing even, her body ready without appearing tense. And for a brief second the memory surfaced again, not overwhelming. Just there, a hospital room years ago. The same kind of quiet dismissal, the same reliance on authority over observation, and the same fragile line between stable and sudden. She blinked once, letting it pass, because this was not that room, not that time, and she was not the same person standing helpless at the edge of someone else's decision. Here, now, she was watching, understanding, choosing. The monitor flickered again, the pattern shifting more clearly this time. No longer subtle, no longer ignorable if anyone truly looked. Naomi leaned in slightly, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that did not ask for permission. "We need to intervene if this progresses," she said, and the words hung there, suspended in the sterile air, waiting to be accepted or dismissed, and in that suspended second, everything balanced on whether anyone else was willing to see what she already knew was coming. The room did not move, but something inside it shifted, subtle at first, like pressure building behind glass as Naomi's words settled into the air and were met with silence that felt heavier than any argument. The attending physician straightened slightly, his posture tightening, as if correcting not the situation but the imbalance of authority. "We are already managing the case appropriately," he said, his tone firm now, less neutral, carrying the quiet edge of someone being challenged in front of the wrong audience. Richard Halston turned fully toward Naomi this time, no longer half distracted, his gaze sharp, assessing, and for a brief second the illusion of control flickered, not gone but strained. "You have said enough," he stated, each word measured, controlled, the kind of voice that ended conversations in boardrooms and left no room for response. But this was not a boardroom, and Naomi did not lower her eyes. She did not argue either. She simply held her position, grounded in what she knew, not what she was allowed to say. The monitor gave another alert, louder now, not alarming yet, but no longer easy to ignore, a shift in rhythm that broke the illusion of stability the room had been clinging to. One of the nurses at the far side glanced up quickly, then back down, unsure whether to react or wait, because waiting was safer. Waiting followed protocol. Waiting meant not stepping out of line. Naomi felt the moment tightening, narrowing again, her awareness sharpening. As each second stretched just slightly longer than it should, Ethan's chest rose, then paused, just a fraction, then fell again. But the delay was clearer now, no longer subtle, no longer something that could be explained away with confidence. Naomi stepped closer, this time not hiding the movement, her voice steady, controlled, but carrying urgency that did not need to be loud. "This is progressing," she said, her eyes on the screen, not on them, because the data did not lie. The physician hesitated, just for a second, his gaze flicking to the monitor, then back to Naomi, then briefly to Richard, as if weighing not the medical reality but the consequence of shifting course in front of him. And that hesitation was all Naomi needed to understand exactly where the line had been drawn. Richard exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening, the first real sign of discomfort breaking through his composure. "You are overstepping," he said, quieter now, but more dangerous, not raised, not angry, just final. The kind of tone that carried expectation of obedience without question. Naomi felt the words, but did not absorb them, because something else was louder, the machine's tone shifting again, sharper this time, the rhythm breaking just enough to fracture the fragile sense of control in the room. One of the residents leaned forward slightly, his expression uncertain now, no longer fully convinced of the calm narrative they had been maintaining. Naomi reached toward the monitor panel, not pressing anything yet, just there, ready, her mind already several steps ahead, mapping what would come next if nothing changed. The space around her seemed to contract, sound narrowing, focus tightening until it was just her, the boy, and the pattern unraveling in real time. And for the first time, Richard's eyes followed her movement, truly followed it, not dismissing, not ignoring, but watching, because something in her stillness, her certainty, did not match the role he had assigned her. The machine gave a sharper tone, the rhythm breaking again. Longer this time, undeniable, and the illusion that everything was under control began to crack, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for doubt to enter the room. Naomi did not wait for permission anymore, because she knew this moment did not belong to hierarchy. It belonged to action, and whether they accepted it or not, the next few seconds would decide everything. The next sound did not wait for permission. It cut clean through the room, sharper now, no longer subtle, no longer something that could be explained away with calm voices and controlled posture. The monitor stuttered again, the rhythm breaking into uneven spacing that stretched the air thin, and this time even those who had chosen not to see it before could not ignore what was happening. Naomi moved before anyone spoke, not rushed, not frantic, just decisive, her hand reaching the panel as her eyes tracked the pattern in real time. "We are losing stability," she said, her voice steady but carrying a weight that filled the silence. The attending physician stepped forward quickly now, his earlier certainty cracking under the pressure of undeniable change, his fingers moving across the controls, ordering adjustments. Calling for additional monitoring, the room shifted from stillness into motion, controlled but urgent, voices layered over each other, equipment activated, footsteps quick but measured, and in the center of it all, Ethan's body remained still, his breathing shallow, the delay between each rise now longer, more visible, as if time itself was stretching between each moment. Richard's composure fractured in a way that was almost invisible to anyone not looking closely, his shoulders stiffening, his hand finally lowering to the edge of the bed, not hovering now, but gripping it, grounding himself in something real as the certainty he carried into the room began to slip. "Fix it," he said, not loudly, not angrily, but with a sharp edge that revealed something deeper, not authority, but fear pressing through control. Naomi did not look at him. She did not respond, because this was no longer about words. It was about seconds, about timing, about knowing when hesitation turned into loss. The monitor tone shifted again, more urgent now, the spacing between signals widening just enough to change everything. The physician issued rapid instructions, the team responding, but Naomi could see it. The lag, the delay in reaction, the gap between recognition and action that cost time they did not have. Her mind moved faster than the room, mapping the pattern, recognizing the progression. And in that moment she understood with absolute clarity that waiting for full agreement would mean falling behind the moment itself. She stepped in closer, her hand already adjusting a setting before anyone could stop her, her movements precise, controlled, grounded in experience that had never been validated by titles but had been built in silence over years of watching what others missed. "We need to support his rhythm now," she said, not asking, her voice cutting through the layered noise, and for a fraction of a second the room hesitated, caught between hierarchy and necessity. The physician turned sharply, ready to correct her, to reassert control, but the monitor interrupted again, louder, clearer, undeniable, and that hesitation shifted, just enough, just long enough for Naomi to continue, her focus unbroken, her hands steady as she acted within the narrow window that still existed. Richard's eyes locked onto her now, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a role, not as a position, but as the only person in the room who seemed to understand exactly what was happening and what needed to happen next. And in that realization something inside him gave way, not completely, not yet, but enough for doubt to replace certainty, enough for control to feel like something fragile instead of absolute. The room moved faster now, aligning, adjusting, but Naomi remained at the center of it, not leading, not commanding, simply acting with a clarity that did not wait for permission, because she knew that in moments like this, there was no space for pride, no space for delay, only the narrow line between action and consequence, and they were standing directly on it. The noise did not disappear, but it softened at the edges, as if the room itself had stepped back to give space to what mattered, the sharp urgency settling into a focused rhythm of movement and breath. Naomi's hand slowed, not because the situation was over, but because control had finally found its place. The monitor still fluctuated, but the pattern was no longer unraveling. It was responding, shifting back towards something stable, something that could hold. She exhaled quietly, not relief. Not yet, just a measured release of tension as her eyes stayed locked on the screen, tracking every change, every rise and fall. The numbers aligning more consistently now, the spacing tightening, returning to a rhythm that felt grounded instead of fragile. Around her the staff moved with more clarity, their earlier hesitation replaced by a coordinated focus, the attending physician adjusted settings with a steadier hand, no longer resisting the direction the moment had taken, just following it, aligning with it. And for a brief second their eyes met, not in challenge, not in authority, but in recognition, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted beyond hierarchy, beyond roles, into something simpler, truth recognized too late to argue against. Richard Halston stood unmoving near the foot of the bed, his hand still resting against the frame, but the grip had changed, no longer tense with control, now holding as if grounding himself in a reality he could not command, his gaze fixed on his son, not the machines, not the people around him, just Ethan, watching each breath as if it were something fragile and irreplaceable. The confidence that had defined him when he walked into the room had dissolved into something quieter, something more human. The kind of silence that comes when certainty is replaced by understanding. Naomi stepped back half an inch, just enough to give space without disconnecting, her posture easing slightly, but her attention unwavering. Because moments like this did not end all at once, they settled gradually, like water finding its level after being disturbed. The monitor gave a softer tone now, steady, consistent, a sound that blended back into the background instead of cutting through it. And with it the room exhaled, not in relief, but in recognition that the immediate edge had passed, though the weight of what almost happened still lingered in the air, unspoken but present. Richard's eyes lifted slowly, not fully, just enough to glance toward Naomi. And for the first time there was no dismissal in his gaze, no calculation, no distance, just a quiet, unsettled awareness, as if he were seeing something he had not allowed himself to see before. Naomi did not hold the look. She returned her attention to Ethan, adjusting a final setting with careful precision, her movements calm, practiced, as if this was simply another moment in a long line of moments that required steadiness over recognition. And maybe to her it was, because she had learned that the work was not about being seen, it was about being present when it mattered. The lights above continued their soft hum, the city beyond the glass unchanged, traffic moving, life continuing, unaware of how close one small life had come to slipping beyond reach. And inside that quiet, controlled space, something invisible had shifted, not in the machines, not in the procedure, but in the way one man now stood without the armor of certainty, and the way one woman remained exactly where she had always been, steady, watchful, and ready, long before anyone thought to listen. Silence did not fall all at once, it settled slowly, like dust after something unseen had shifted. The room still active but no longer urgent, movements quieter, voices lower, the sharp edge of crisis replaced by a steady, controlled rhythm that felt almost fragile in its calm. Naomi remained where she was, her eyes tracing the monitor one more time, not out of doubt, but out of habit, confirming stability, confirming that the pattern was holding, the spacing now consistent, the rise and fall of Ethan's chest matching the quiet certainty of recovery. She adjusted a final setting with precise care, then let her hand fall back to her side, her posture easing just slightly, not relief, not yet, just completion of what needed to be done. The attending physician stepped back from the panel, his shoulders no longer tense, his earlier resistance replaced by a quiet acceptance that did not need to be spoken. He glanced at Naomi again, longer this time, as if reevaluating something that had been dismissed too quickly. But he said nothing, because there was nothing that could be said without acknowledging what had already become clear. Across the room the staff resumed their roles, documenting, checking, moving forward. But there was a subtle difference now, a shift in the way their eyes moved, a hesitation before ignoring, a small awareness that had not been there before. Richard Halston had not moved from his place, his hand still resting on the edge of the bed, but now it was no longer a grip, it was a connection, his fingers lightly touching the sheet near his son's arm, not controlling, not commanding, just present, his gaze fixed on Ethan as if memorizing each breath, each movement, as if understanding for the first time how little control he actually held in moments that truly mattered. The confidence that once filled the space around him had been replaced by something quieter, something heavier, not weakness, but awareness, the kind that comes when certainty breaks and something more honest takes its place. Naomi stepped back another inch, giving the room its space again, her role returning to what it had always been on the surface. But something had already changed beneath that surface, something that could not be reversed or ignored. Richard's eyes lifted again, this time fully, meeting hers without the barrier that had defined every moment before. There was no arrogance now, no dismissal, just a question that had no words, a recognition forming too slowly for speech, and for a second that stretched longer than expected, neither of them looked away. The room continuing around them, the machines steady, the lights unchanged. But in that quiet exchange something settled into place. Not forgiveness, not resolution, just the undeniable truth that the balance between them had shifted in a way that could not be undone. Naomi gave a small nod, not acknowledgement of him, but of the moment, then turned her attention back to Ethan, checking one final detail before stepping fully away, her movements calm, unhurried, as if she had always known how this would end, even when no one else believed her. And behind her, Richard remained still, watching not just his son, but the space she had occupied, as if trying to understand how everything he believed about control, about authority, about who mattered in a room like this, had been rewritten in a matter of minutes without a single word asking for it. The room had returned to its rhythm, but Richard Halston had not. He stood there longer than necessary, longer than anyone expected, his eyes moving between the steady monitor and Naomi Carter, as if trying to reconcile two versions of reality that no longer fit together, the one he walked in with and the one that now stood quietly in front of him, unshaken, uncelebrated, simply present. He took a step forward, then stopped, the movement small but unfamiliar, like someone learning how to approach a moment without control. His voice when it came was lower, stripped of its earlier sharpness. "My son, is he stable?" The question was simple, but it carried something new, not authority, not assumption, just uncertainty. Naomi glanced at the monitor one more time before answering, her tone calm. "Even, he is responding well, but he will need close observation." She did not add anything more, did not claim credit, did not explain what had almost happened, because the truth was already in the room, visible in every quiet detail. Richard nodded once, slowly, as if processing more than just her words. His hand moved from the bed frame to rest lightly near Ethan's arm, not touching, but closer than before, a small shift that said more than anything he could have spoken. The attending physician stepped in briefly, offering a clinical summary, measured and professional, but even his voice carried a trace of something different, a subtle acknowledgement of what had changed. Richard listened, but his attention drifted back to Naomi, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. The kind that comes when a certainty breaks and leaves space for something real. "You saw it before anyone else," he said finally, not accusing, not questioning, just stating what he could no longer deny. Naomi met his gaze briefly, then looked back at Ethan. "I have seen patterns like this before," she replied, her voice quiet, grounded in experience that did not need validation. Richard exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering just slightly, the weight of the moment settling into him in a way that could not be undone. "And I dismissed you," he added, the words coming slower now, less controlled, as if each one had to pass through something new before it could exist. Naomi did not respond immediately, not because she was unsure, but because the moment did not require correction or agreement. It simply existed. And she let it. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but honest. Richard looked down at his son again, then back at Naomi, and for the first time since entering the room, his voice carried no authority at all, only something human, something unguarded. "Thank you," he said, simple, direct, without performance. Naomi gave a small nod, nothing more, because she did not need the words, she had never needed them. Her attention returned to the monitor, to the steady rhythm that now held, to the work that continued beyond recognition. And as she adjusted a final note on the chart, she stepped back fully, returning to her place without ceremony, without pause, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But behind her, Richard remained where he was, not moving forward, not stepping away, just standing in the space where his certainty had once been, now replaced by something quieter, something that would not leave when the room did, something that would follow him long after the machines fell silent and the lights dimmed, because for the first time, he had not been the one who saved what mattered most, and that truth settled deeper than anything he had ever controlled. The room did not change, but everything inside it felt different. The machines continued their quiet rhythm, the steady tone blending into the background like it always had, but now it carried a meaning that could not be ignored. Naomi Carter moved with the same calm precision as before, documenting, checking, adjusting small details that most people would never notice, her steps light against the polished floor, her focus already shifting to the next patient, the next moment that would require the same level of attention, because for her, this was not an ending. It was simply part of a continuous line of responsibility that did not pause for recognition. Across the room, Richard Halston remained still for a long moment, his hand now resting fully against the bed beside Ethan, not hovering, not controlling, just there, feeling the presence of something he had almost lost without understanding it. His eyes followed Naomi briefly as she stepped toward the doorway, not in confusion, not in disbelief, but in quiet reflection, as if trying to hold on to something that had slipped through his understanding of the world. He opened his mouth slightly, as if to say something more, but no words came. Because there was nothing that could reshape what had already happened, no sentence that could undo the weight of what he had seen in her and failed to recognize. Naomi did not look back, not out of indifference, but because she did not need to. Her role had never been about being seen at the end of a moment. It had always been about being present within it. The hallway outside carried a softer light, warmer than the sterile brightness inside, and as she stepped into it, the sound of the machines faded slightly, replaced by distant footsteps and quiet voices, the hospital continuing its endless cycle of need and response. Behind her, the door remained open, just enough for the steady tone of the monitor to drift into the space beyond, a quiet reminder of what had been held together. Richard finally exhaled, a slow, unsteady release that carried more than relief. It carried realization, the kind that does not arrive all at once, but settles gradually, reshaping how everything. Before it is understood, he looked down at his son again, then back toward the doorway where Naomi had disappeared, and for the first time in a long time, he did not reach for control, did not issue instructions, did not try to define the moment. He simply stood there, present, aware, and in that stillness,